Tonight, after almost 2 years, Camp Morgan is set to come down.
And this treaty sets the stone solid. It carves the pathway to ensure and enshrine that our government will be recognized.
On the heels of the historic self-government treaty signed by the MMF and Canada, 2 Dakota nations are challenging against it.
I think it's a cool part of our story, and to have these, celebrate our winter packages is going to be awesome.
And with just over 2 weeks to Christmas, a business in BC is coming up with some unique gift ideas. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Search the landfill became a big topic in the city of Winnipeg over the past couple of years. An encampment that started in response to Winnipeg police not searching a landfill for the remains of 2 First Nations women will now soon come down. And the filing of a human rights complaint is also underway regarding that same landfill search. With more, here's T.R. Wheatley.
Camp Morgan, on its 2nd anniversary from when it first began, will put its fire out and shut down for good. It was set up near the city-owned Brady landfill on the south side of Winnipeg on December 18, 2022. Just weeks after Winnipeg police announced Jeremy Skibitsky, who was already in custody for the murder of Rebecca Contois, was also being charged for killing Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and the yet-to-be-identified person given the name Buffalo Woman. Camp Morgan, of course, began as a response to Winnipeg police telling the families the remains of Harris and Myron ended up at the privately owned Prairie Green landfill north of the city, but a search was not feasible. Organizers committed to keeping the camp going until a search happened. After a 15-month political fight, both the federal and provincial governments committed a combined $40 million towards a search. Earlier this month, the physical search of the landfill began. In a Facebook post, Morgan's cousin Melissa Robinson said, quote, "It's only a matter of time now till we are able to bring Morgan home and lay her to rest properly," unquote. Meanwhile, Harris's daughter, Elle Harris, along with 2 other women, Robin Johnston and Susan Caribou, have filed a human rights complaint of discrimination against the city of Winnipeg for not conducting a search of both the Prairie Green and Brady landfills. The complaint says the city discriminated against Morgan Harris, Buffalo Woman, Tanya Nepanak, and all Indigenous women, girls, 2S LGBTQIA+ people and their families. Nepanak is believed to also be a victim of homicide. In 2012, Sean Lamb was charged in her murder, but the charges were stayed due to lack of evidence. The complaint has 18 reference points the city ignored, including, quote, "on the basis of our ancestry and sex without bona fide and reasonable cause," unquote. The city violated Section 13 of the Human Rights Code. So far, there has been no response from the city. This past August, the man responsible for Harris and the other 3 women's deaths was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for first-degree murder. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thanks, TR. Some members of the Piikani Nation in southern Alberta walked in a protest on Monday against the proposed opening of a new thermal coal mine. The Grassy Mountain Coal Project just passed a vote by local residents, with 70% approving. The Australian-owned mine would produce 4.5 million tons of steel-making coal for Asian markets. Residents of the Piikani Nation, located 75 kilometers downstream of the site, are concerned about the environmental impacts.
It's an open pit mine, and anyone knows that within southern Alberta, we have hurricane winds down here. And all that, whatever they're drilling, whatever's coming out of the ground that they're drilling, that's going to come our way, be blown our way. We have chronically ill, we have elders. So the selenium deposits we're afraid of the levels that it might poison the river, the Old Man River.
To Saskatchewan now, where earlier this year, a historic building in a community was destroyed in a suspicious fire. Now a suspect has been arrested in connection with the incident. On September 28th, the 85-year-old St. George Anglican Church in Loon Lake, Saskatchewan, was destroyed by fire. After a detailed investigation, Loon Lake RCMP arrested 25-year-old Shandon Chief from Muckwa, Sahayagan First Nation. He faces charges of arson and breaching a conditional sentence order. Chief appeared in provincial court on December 9th, with his next court date set for December 19th in Meadow Lake. Toxic drug deaths in British Columbia have reached a low not seen in years, according to preliminary data from the province's coroner service. 155 British Columbians lost their lives to unregulated drugs in October, the lowest toll since 2020. It also showed a significant decline in total deaths this year compared to last year. The agency says it does not yet have the investigate data to explain the cause of the decline. Unregulated drug toxicity remains the leading cause of unnatural deaths in the province for British Columbians between the ages of 10 and 59. New Zealand customs officials say a Canadian woman just made Santa's naughty list after allegedly trying to smuggle drugs into the country disguised as Christmas gifts. The woman was arrested at the airport after roughly 10 kilograms of methamphetamine was discovered, wrapped as phony presents in her carry-on. The drugs are worth more than $3 million. The woman is now facing charges related to drug smuggling. Canada Post is accusing the Union of Postal Workers of taking negotiations backwards, as the union says it has lowered its wage demands.
We've brought our wage demands down. We've taken away a large demand to put both bargaining units together, a demand that Canada Post had claimed would be hundreds of millions of dollars in cost. We've taken those off the table, and Canada Post, as they usually do, tell the public something that isn't true.
As pressures mount on the federal government to intervene, it has remained steadfast response that it will not.
Special mediator has been nominated by the federal government, but that again speaks to the absolute importance of those two parties to come together and come to an agreement.
Canada Post says it is reviewing the union's latest offer, but the Crown Corporation is dampening any expectations of a speedy resolution to the strike, now in its 26th day. The Bank of Canada is expected to deliver another big interest rate cut on Wednesday. The cut is expected to bring the key rate down 50 basis points to 3.25% and mark the final policy rate decision before the new year. The Bank of Canada reduced its rate by half a percentage point in October in response to inflation returning to target, but signaled the size of the next rate decision would depend on the data. Canada's inflation rate was 2% in October. Well, we always want to hear what you have to say, or if you have anything you'd like to see here, here's how to continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, you can send us an email to news@aptn.ca. You can read and watch our stories anytime by going to our website. That's aptnnews.ca. You can also find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Time for a quick break here, but still to come, a look at a new series on the death of Anna Mae Pictou-Aquash.
There's no confusion anymore. You know, people who have been able to witness the documentary in the States are not confused about what happened to my mom. As a matter of fact, I see groups of women rising up and agreeing and saying, you know what, this needs to stop.
Welcome back. Days after the Manitoba Métis Federation and Canada signed their self-government treaty, two Dakota nations in Manitoba launched a legal challenge against it. Reporter Sierra Bettens takes a closer look.
On November 30th in Winnipeg, Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand and Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Gary Anandasangri signed the Red River Métis Self-Government and Implementation Treaty. It recognizes the MMF as the government of the Red River Métis and affirms its internal lawmaking powers for its citizenship.
This treaty sets the stone solid. It carves the pathway to ensure and enshrine that our government will be recognized. I am not a group. I am not an organization. I'm not an advocacy group. I am a government. And that's what they need to understand.
However, on December 2nd, the Dakota Teepee and Chinupawakpa First Nations filed an injunction against it. The MMF and the Attorney General of Canada are named as respondents. The Dakotas argue that the treaty is constitutionally invalid and that Canada and the Red River Métis failed to consult them. They demand an injunction prohibiting the MMF from making land and resource claims without consulting them. In a phone interview with APTN, Dakota Teepee Chief Dennis Pache said the injunction asserts their rights.
Not any animosity or anything, it's just that the government is neglecting Dakota people. They did give us an apology July 15th of this year, but they've refused to meet with us or not wanting to work with us to implement what that means.
MMF Minister Will Goodon said the Dakota injunction was disappointing and that it asserts a false hierarchy of rights.
I think that there's misconceptions out there that in the Constitution there is a hierarchy, that there is different levels of rights, and different nations have different constitutional rights, which isn't true.
The injunction is the second legal action the Dakotas have launched against the MMF this year. On October 11th, Dakota Teepee and Chinupawakpa filed a statement of claim against the MMF, Manitoba, and Canada's Attorney General, alleging they were excluded from land and resource consultations. It called for a distinctions-based approach to Indigenous rights.
So we were here based on a distinctions-based process of time. Who was here 12,000 years ago, who was here 1,000, who was here, and so forth. And that's a process that's been used in British Columbia.
Goodon agrees that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit must be recognized as distinct and urges Canada to deliver on treaty obligations.
Going back to Louis Riel, when he negotiated our entry into Confederation, he made sure that in the talks was that Canada needed to sign treaties with First Nations. So we're going back to those days, and we still agree that Canada needs to fulfill its obligations to all Indigenous peoples.
The Red River Métis Treaty does not include harvesting or land rights. Section 95 discusses the procedures to be taken if the treaty infringes on the rights of other Indigenous peoples, which includes a 3-step dispute process. Goodon said consultations with First Nations on the treaty were the Crown's duty, not the MMF's. In a statement sent to APTN, Jacinth Goulet, speaking for Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, said the treaty included over a year of consultations with other Indigenous groups, including First Nations in Manitoba, before it was finalized. She said Canada is now reviewing the motion. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The House of Commons Parliamentary Committee on Indigenous Affairs is studying barriers to economic development on Tuesday, but the conversation among several members of Parliament and witnesses focused on the fraud associated with false Indigenous identity. Conservative MP Martin Shields used Liberal MP Randy Boissonneau's resignation from Cabinet as an example to ask why would people risk their political reputation by claiming false indigeneity. Lawyer Leah Ballantyne responded that there are gaps in the terms Indigenous that allow people to further their careers by appropriating an Indigenous identity. She also said part of the problem is that the Métis are not well defined.
In fact, I beg to ask this committee, where is the definition of Métis? I don't see it. And I also see in recommendation 25 and 26 that the Métis get put on the same level as the First Nation and the Inuit, the three partners under Section 35. And without having that legal definition of what Métis is highly problematic.
It's been 49 years since the murder of Anna May Pictou Akwash, and a new documentary about her comes out on Wednesday. After 30 years of fighting for justice, Anna May's daughter Denise Pictou Maloney says she is finally at peace. Angel Moore reports.
It's poignant to me because it's just, you know, how you go from, you know, the bouffant fashionista to a mugshot. You know, there's a lot of story in there.
Denise Pictou Maloney is looking at photos of her mother, Annie May Pictou Akwash. Akwash was an activist, a teacher, and a member of the Sipekne'katik First Nation. Maloney compares two pictures when her mother became active in fighting for Indigenous rights.
And what she taught me in this and what I see in that transition, you know, where she comes to, where she's let her hair grow and she's now, you know, more worried about the human rights initiatives and the Indigenous human rights as opposed to imagery showing up of being accepted. I saw that shift in her, and it was empowering to me to see a woman go through that commitment.
Akwash joined the American Indian Movement, a grassroots organization founded in 1968 to protect First Nations rights in the U.S. Maloney says her mother was an inspiration.
I just think of how raggedy-ass she was. That's literally the only way I can describe it. I don't see anything that would, you know, think any kind of regret. I loved her here and I loved her here. And never did it matter, because to us she was always our mother.
Akwash was murdered in mid-December in 1975 in the Pine Ridge Reservation in North Dakota. She was 30 years old. Two people were convicted of her murder, one in 2004 and the other in 2010. Maloney agreed to participate in a 4-part docuseries called Vow of Silence, the assassination of Annie May.
There's no confusion anymore. You know, people who have been able to witness the documentary in the States are not confused about what happened to my mom. As a matter of fact, I see groups of women rising up and agreeing and saying, you know what, this needs to stop.
Maloney hopes the docuseries helps other MMIWG family and survivors.
So I want to say this to my family members and to sisters and, you know, other impacted survivors. This was never ever about just Annie May. This was always about the next 7 generations.
After decades of advocacy for justice, Maloney says now she is at peace.
To me, you know, this year feels different because I feel like I have a place to put that. I don't have to carry it anymore.
Vow of Silence, the assassination of Annie May, will be streaming in Canada on December 11th on Disney+. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabuktuk, also known as Halifax.
Looking forward to watching that one. Time for one last break here. Still to come tonight, a preview of tonight's episode of Face to Face. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Ellis Cowley happened upon a rather friendly deer in the city of Kenora, Ontario. Ellis was able to get a few pictures. Thanks for sharing, and stay safe around our antlered friends. You can send your photos to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 9 in Charlottetown and Halifax. -8 with snow in Kuujjuaq, snow and 9 below in Nain. 0 in Montreal, -4 with flurries in Val-d'Or. -5 and cloudy in Sault Ste. Marie, snow and -1 in North Bay. -10 with snow in Thunder Bay, flurries and 20 below in Sioux Lookout. In northern Manitoba, -21 in God's Lake, 20 below in the Pas. -20 with the sun out in Winnipeg, 22 below in Brandon. -24 in Regina, cloudy and 20 below in Saskatoon. Sunny and -20 in Buffalo Narrows, 24 below in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, snow and minus 14 in high level, 18 below with snow in Fort Chippewa. Minus 5 in flurries in Edmonton, 1 below in Lethbridge. Plus 8 in Vancouver, 7 above in Victoria. Minus 3 with flurries in Prince George, minus 1 in Smithers with snow. Minus 12 in Old Crow, 11 below in Beaver Creek. Minus 24 in Yellowknife, minus 11 in Norman Wells. 17 below in Sax Harbor, snow and minus 12 in Paulatuck. Minus 9 with snow in Chesterfield, 26 below in Baker Lake. Minus 24 in Resolute, 30 below in Joe Haven. A winery owned by a First Nation in British Columbia has developed a special collaboration with Indigenous artists from their territory just in time for Christmas. Inkameep Cellars Winery was started by the Osoyoos Indian Band in 2000. Since then, their wines have won numerous awards around the world. Located along the shores of Osoyoos Lake in BC's wine country, the company brings in over $1 million a year in sales. They've been able to invest in other businesses. This year, they have collaborated with artist John Paul Velton to create these special edition ornaments that include words from their language. Justin Hall speaks for Inkameep Cellars.
These are going to be accessible. I think they're coming through to our wine club as well. It's going to be, I'm really excited for it. It's part of our story as well with the 4 food chiefs that are on there. There's the king salmon, which is Intiti, Sia, which is a Saskatoon berry, the bitter root, which is Speetlum in our language as well, and the bear, Skimheast. Yeah, so I think it's a cool part of our story, and to have these, celebrate our winter package is going to be awesome.
A new episode of Face to Face is just minutes away. Our guest tonight is Sean Carlton, an associate professor of history and Indigenous studies at the University of Manitoba. Among our topics tonight is the rise in residential school denialism.
It has certainly proliferated from the extreme far right into the more mainstream right wing. I wouldn't say that it has become mainstream. I don't think that the majority of Canadians, for example, are out there thinking residential schools were well-intentioned. It was of the times. Abuses were, didn't happen. Deaths didn't happen in these schools. I think it has become part of a right-wing identity that has moved from the fringe into more respectable space on the political right.
And you can catch our entire interview with Sean Carlton in less than 90 seconds from now. We're all out of time for your APTN National News for this Tuesday, December 10th. For much more, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And we will be back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with your first look at the day's news. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. Have a great night.